Good morning and welcome to the channel. I am Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. Normally I'd try to have a little intro video today, but couldn't have the time to get that done this morning. Good morning, Ozzy. Glad to have you here and happy to see you, actually. Glad somebody was standing by and ready to jump right in. The church bells appear to be running about a minute and a half late, so that's how I realized that I was just a minute and a half late for starting the stream. But let's go ahead and get started here. I've got, while I'm kind of waiting for things to settle in, I have something to read here. So let me go ahead and share this with you before we get started on the news itself. Good morning, Douglas. Welcome as well. Glad to see you. That's perfect. This letter is from John Roberts. This is an American who is working for the Ukrainian military near Avdiivka now because they've just recently been removed from the area. He's an instructor. He's been helping them learn how to do things in the Western and U.S. way. And he talks a lot about how the Ukrainians pick up these skills quickly. However, and here's the however, and I'll kind of go through this part right here, which I think is the kind of the important stuff to be discussing right here. On the ground in Avdiivka, we felt the results of current American politics with full force. We are accustomed to fighting with less artillery than the Russians. We have already developed clever ways of using precision fire to counter Russian artillery. Our artillery soldiers use their American-provided weapons efficiently and effectively to batter the second largest military in the world, so that our assaulters have cover while they pierce like needles to rapidly cut the Russian forces' critical arteries. This week, our ammunition has effectively stopped. Our precision scalpel cannot cut. We are used to fighting under strength. We are intelligently adapted and trained to push ourselves to the highest level of combat performance. But we cannot deliver miracles. We have already delivered many miracles in this war, and I'm sure we will continue to do so. But hoping for miracles is not a reliable way to win a war. I'm extremely disappointed in a super minority decision to block military aid to Ukraine in our American Congress. More than that, I need to go pray and say goodbye to more of my students and friends. He talks about the exceptional nature of Ukrainian soldiers, their ability to master complex tasks quickly. He speaks about them not sleeping, not complaining, that they are fighting for their families, and they are being taken away from their families to try and save their freedom. And he talks about some of this stuff in the historical context. Briefly, I'm going to touch on this next paragraph here. Hi, Jerry and Lucille. Thank you for joining me. Instead of having an intro video today, I'm just kind of reading through this letter from John Roberts. He's helping out in Ukraine. Border security or healthcare or whatever you want to say, it is clear to me that this is solely about Ukraine. We didn't have proper border security or health care in 2010 either, or 2000, or 1990, or 1980, or 70, or 60, or 50. Our decision and ability as Americans to have funding for something we supposedly want has nothing to do with enabling Ukraine's current defense. The problems in America that this super minority in the House of Congress are citing in order to block funding are enduring since the founding of our American nation. Let me read back up. Are enduring since the founding of our American nation in the 1700s. They have nothing to do with Ukraine in 2024. I am sure that France in 1776 could have come up with many excuses not to support American colonists fighting for independence from British subjugation. Foreign support and arms enabled the American Congress to stand today. Now we are tasked to keep the light of freedom lit for others. We are fighting hard against impossible odds. All you need to do is help from a distance, and that is a good thing for Americans. You do not want to come here. The Ukrainians are dying, and it is not out of some ignorance or accident. They are dedicated to their liberation from Soviet values and Russian oppression. They are spilling oceans of blood to join the free democracies of the world. Thanks to American aid, a new free nation is being born in the world. Ukraine is not giving up. Americans, we cannot give up either. And that is again from John Roberts, brought to you by War Translated over on Twitter. This is the type of passion that is being exhibited by even Americans working with the Ukrainian troops on the battlefield. He does talk about the difference between the cultures of Ukraine and Russia, how Russia, in fact, how people all over the world look to America to see our balanced approach to life and law, that people who are captured under rule of dictator or elite culture, who view their people as resources and sheep to be sheared or slaughtered or sacrificed for power, look to America for their light of hope. And he says that Russians live in such a culture of dictators and elite culture. Their society, he says, currently does not dream of progress or prosperity or fairness. Their desire is for suffering, poverty, and ignorance. With these conditions, the leaders of Russia can shape their people's minds towards anything they want. Like a hostage falling in love with their captors, Russian people are so desperate and miserable that they will do anything to satisfy the masters they depend on. And that's your introduction for today. So let's go ahead and jump straight into I think the biggest news from this weekend. Denmark's prime minister says that they're going to donate all of their artillery and artillery shells to Ukraine. She says, that this would be Mette Frederiksen, and says that there is still ammunition in European stocks. This is not a question of only production, because we have the weapons. We have the ammunition. We have air defense that we don't have to use ourselves at the moment that we should deliver to Ukraine. Confirmation of this from multiple sources. Anton Herashchenko added this from the same Prime Minister of Denmark. Ukraine is asking for ammunition and artillery now. We, Denmark, have decided to transfer all our artillery to Ukraine. So, sorry, friends, there is military equipment in Europe. It is not only a matter of production. I believe I've got a video here that actually has her saying this. So let me go ahead and get that popped up right here.
But if you ask the Ukrainians, they are asking us for ammunition now, artillery now. From the Danish side, we decided to donate our entire artillery. And I'm sorry to say, friends, there are still ammunition in stock in Europe. This is not only a question about production, because we have weapons, we have ammunitions, we have air defense that we don't have to use ourselves at the moment, that we should deliver to Ukraine. So, yes. But if you ask the Ukraine...
So that's the PM, Prime Minister of Denmark. And they are delivering the last of their Caesar systems and all of the artillery that they've got on hand in their warehouses. They're emptying their storehouses, sending it to Ukraine, because they recognize that if they can stop Russia in Ukraine, they'll have stopped Russia. So that's what we're looking at here for Denmark. That's the big news. The Czech President Peter Pavel says that he has found 500,000 pieces of 155 millimeter ammunition and another 300,000 pieces of 122 millimeter ammunition, which can be delivered within weeks to Ukraine, and is asking for the funding to do so. He says these are in different countries, and they could be purchased and transferred within a few weeks if funding could be secured from U.S., Germany, and Sweden. I don't believe the Czech are in a position to purchase those themselves. That should be a pretty large capital investment, but I don't know the details of that. That said, they're finding it in other countries, and they're saying they can have them now. And they're just asking for dollars to buy them. That could be another 800,000 shells. That would make a big difference to the war in Ukraine, because artillery, Much as people like to say we've advanced beyond it, the war in Ukraine is still heavily involved with artillery, and to a certain extent, the king of the battlefield at this point in time. When you can't rely on air superiority and you can't rely on fancy weapons and missiles, in the end, there's something about a big kaboom that hits where you target it that can't be replaced, especially in the relatively cheap price of artillery. Of course, we hear more threats from Dmitry Medvedev, who has gone so far. This one was a hard one for me to stomach here for a moment. Medvedev said that if Ukraine achieves its goal, as in reaching its 1991 borders, not even saying entering Russia, but Medvedev says if they reach their 1991 borders, they're going to nuke Berlin, London, Washington, and Kiev, of course, with all of their strategic assets. Long ago put into the flight targets of the Russian nuclear triad. This is literally holding the world hostage. That is what we're fighting against in Ukraine. That is the people, the evil that Ukraine is fighting against at this point. It's gone from, this vague hinting that, we have nukes and we might use, tactical nukes in this war if things don't go our way. And we might step it up a notch to, we will nuke the world if we are not given exactly what we want. If Ukraine manages to fight us back and take their own territory back, we'll nuke the world. That is truly what Medvedev said. And the whole text of what he said is here, talking about the whole thing. Let me get this kind of pulled out a little bit. And the thing is that he's talking like it's the collapse of Russia. The truth is that Russia wouldn't be in any danger of collapse if they had not assaulted into another country, because Ukraine has shown, between Chechnya and Georgia, and there was another thing they were involved in, which I'm forgetting right now, over the last 20 years, Russia has been in an expansionist phase. Now they're in Ukraine. And Ukraine is teaching the world that Russia can be stopped. With blood, with hard artillery, with money, they can be stopped. And that is something that Russia would not have discovered if they had not been basically picking on the wrong target. They're the big bully. Once the bully's face down, what are they supposed to do? In this case, they're threatening to nuke the world. And if somebody's willing to threaten to nuke the world and nuke the world, there's somebody that doesn't belong on the world stage in the first place. And I hate to say it that way. More sources that basically confirm that. It's just Medvedev tends to be not taken seriously because of his particular nature as to the nature of what he says. He's always the doom posting individual that makes all of the nasty threats. But make no mistake, he represents the Russian government. In all respects, he is a spokesman for the Russian government. And that is what they're threatening to do if they don't get what they want. They're holding the world hostage. And we as the world cannot afford for that to happen. Because where will it stop? The Munich conference went pretty well for Ukraine. It's clear that there are a lot more things going on than just Ukraine right now. And it's a bit frustrating, I think, for many people. They do have a bunch of other things that they're having to deal with. The Estonian Prime Minister said Putin is showing the dictator's handbook in real life. Let's not discuss to do something. Let's do everything to stop him. Don't make the same mistakes like we did in history. Don't let aggression spread across the world. From Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing the name there. From this conference emerged that they're expecting F-16s very soon. They thought maybe in spring, but it looks like it's going to be more like later, June-ish time frame. I do know that American forces are saying that Ukrainian pilots will finish their training sometime in the May time frame. So that's a reasonable combination. BBC Russian went ahead and talked about the entire conference. They spelled out a lot of the stuff in it, but I thought these last two paragraphs were particularly interesting. 2022 was the year when everyone underestimated Ukraine. 2023 was the year when everyone underestimated our enemy. 2024 should be the moment of truth, according to organizer Ukrainian businessman Viktor Pinchuk. And one of the participants of this of the lunch that they're talking about here was American General and former CIA head David Petraeus. He assessed the prospects for Ukraine in a slightly different way. When I commanded the operation in Iraq, he said, I was often asked whether I was an optimist or a pessimist. I answered, neither one nor the other. I'm a realist. And the reality is that everything is difficult all the time. But difficult does not mean hopeless. So that's kind of what happened at the Munich conference. A lot of things have been going on as well. Let's go ahead and move on to the situation over the Azov Sea. Apparently, over this weekend, 2 more fighter jets, making a total of 6, have been shot down over the Azov Sea and in the east of Ukraine. These helicopters were working the area where 2 of these aircraft were shot down just overnight, and they are keeping this area sealed off in order to continue their search operations. They did confirm another Su-35 was shot down, and this time it was Fighter Bomber, which is the notorious Russian propagandist account that has confirmed that. Ukraine has stated that they've shot down an additional Su-34 and Su-35, with a total of 4 Su-34s and 2 Su-35s shot down within the last 3 days. Theories are running rampant. Of course, the biggest thought is obviously Ukraine is doing more with their Patriot systems. That's not the only possible system that's involved. I could go into some of my own wild theories that I have absolutely no support. But at this point in time, all we know is that Ukraine has moved something close to the front lines that is able to reach out and touch Russian aircraft during their attack runs over the Azov Sea again. So we'll just keep watching. Does anything change on the Russian side? Some of them have been claiming that, it's the Russians that are shooting down these aircraft. And if so, thank you very much, Russia. However, I see no proof of that either. Let's go ahead and move on to the news out of Ukraine from this weekend. President Zelensky was attending the Munich Security Conference that I mentioned already. He said, if Ukraine is left alone, Russia will destroy us. There is no middle ground here. If you don't support Ukraine all the way, get their territory back, eventually Russia will win. And if they win, they will destroy all of Ukraine, and they will violently repress, suppress, murder, and do other things to the Ukrainian civilization effectively. They'll remove them from existence. And that is what the stakes are in the war. This Ukrainian reconnaissance drone Furia has a speed of 65 kilometers per hour and can fly 50 kilometers behind enemy lines with a endurance of about 3 hours. I thought that was just really interesting to see some of the technology that keeps popping up in Ukraine and seeing where it goes. My dad would be able to talk probably more extensively about these types of drones and things like that, because they're basically the same types of remote control aircraft that he used to build himself in many ways. Obviously, the designs are a little bit different than they did back then, but it's fun. It's interesting to see. A new postage stamp is being produced in Kyiv, and it shows the Russian Empire must fall. You can see all of Russia in various burning bits, being lit on fire by a cat, apparently. And from Jason J. Smart, he says, it's not if, but when Russia collapses. The world will be a better, more peaceful place. The evil empire must fall. More of the situation in Avdiivka, and this is the last of those who are being evacuated from the town. This is, I got to kind of want to pull this back a little bit so you can see the whole video here. This is not in English. But these are the last, a couple of last Russian-speaking women being evacuated from the town. They are fleeing to Ukraine because they recognize that that the Russians are not there to save them. The Russians are there to take over and engage in their brutal repression in the area. So this evacuation is done as quickly as they can in a civilian vehicle. Apparently, it's not. It's a tough situation for them. Of course, now Avdiivka has been entirely captured as far as the southern. Sorry about that. Of course, at this point, Avdiivka has been captured by Russian forces at this point. From Chasiv Yar, this was painted on a wall. It says, "We are not asking too much. We just need an artillery shells and aviation. Rest we do ourselves. Armed Forces of Ukraine." Let's move over to the Russian side, and a lot of the news from this weekend was literally buried under the news of Alexei Navalny being killed over the weekend. The amount of additional information coming out is a bit troubling. The protests that started to come out, actually, I should rephrase that. Many people were arrested as they went to memorials for Alexei Navalny. And they were just putting flowers in these memorials, and then they were arrested. So 300 were detained from these types of memorials. And that is in all parts of the country, though particularly Moscow and St. Petersburg. Russian authorities still refuse to give Navalny's family access to his body. Or as somebody else said from BBC Russian, since Navalny's body is not being handed over, it means there is something to hide. Okay, I'm going to pause there for just a moment because I saw this elsewhere just this morning. I have not had a chance to confirm it. The reports are that his body was transported someplace else that was not the normal place that they transport bodies that die in custody in this fashion, and that a guard who'd seen the body said it was covered in bruises. Again, I don't have confirmation of this. I just have it from a single source, and I don't have that source in front of me. I'm passing it on because that goes along with the same information I'm receiving elsewhere, that there was potentially something else going on with Navalny. I've also seen reports, these from multiple sources, that the FSB was there just 2 days ago or 2 days before he died, disconnecting security cameras and sensors and systems like that, and working on that situation there. I hesitate to put too much stock in those, only because that borders on conspiracy theory territory. But I'm certainly drawing some certain parallels to a certain other person who died in custody in the United States that is very popular to talk about a while back. And it just really, it troubles me. Repressive regimes. Russian governors claim drone attacks across the country on February 17th overnight. They include Belgorod, Kaluga, Bryansk, and Voronezh, and that say that they downed multiple drones overnight. This one, I can't play the video for it, but I'm going to talk about it. If you are in any way active on social media in the Ukraine war space, you will have seen multiple videos actually recently of POWs being killed by during their capture by Russian forces. This is yet another one of those where 2 Ukrainian POWs were located on Sunday, And while in custody, while tied up, while unarmed, they were shot and killed by Russian forces. It seems to be a repeating pattern, and we're seeing it a lot more these days. I'm going to take a brief pause here just to give you guys a moment to chime in and ask any questions. And I've been kind of moving at a blistering pace here for a bit. Is there anything that's on your guys' mind that you'd like me to talk about instead of just this material here? Or if you want to ask a question, absolutely pipe in. I'd be happy to do so. I'll tell you, there's one of the challenges of covering this war, even from as far away as I am and as disconnected from the war as I am, but covering this war has been the constant emotions that are associated with it. The fact that in every news story there is a deeper, often painful and troubling story behind it. And if you are closely tied to this situation, it's going to be even worse for you. So my heart goes out to all of you who are tracking this war even closer than I am, and hope that you are able to overcome any of the challenges that are coming your way, the emotions that are maybe overwhelming you. And I want you to know that you are in my prayers as well. It's tough to do. It's tough enough for me, and I'm just so far away. It shouldn't be tough at all. But seeing so much suffering and feeling almost powerless against it is an awful feeling. And I just hope those on the front lines are able to keep their heads up, keep their chin up, and continue to overcome challenge after challenge. Moving on to the international front at this point in time. Over in Armenia, they're saying that they are no longer Moscow's ally on the issue of Ukraine. In fact, they've kind of made that a broader statement recently, saying they're no longer allied with Russia at all. And it looks like that relationship has entirely broken down. The European chief, Josep Borrell, says there's no bureaucratic excuse for the European Union not to send more ammo or weapons to Ukraine. They have 60 frameworks to facilitate joint procurement, and the industry has the capacity. They don't have the orders. So start placing those orders. Start putting the money where your mouth is. From Russian state news agency TASS, this is talking about Medvedev's comments earlier, but this is actually coming from their state news agency, the one that's targeted to their Russian audience. They say that they will strike Kiev, Berlin, London, Washington, and other places that have long been included in the flight targets of the nuclear triad. Now, it's been clear that Russia has had these targets programmed in for a long time. I sometimes wonder if they just don't know how to reprogram them. However, it's once again the bully being the bully. And that's the concern we have. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte said to the Kiev Independent, the European Union's economic power is by far superior to Russia. He is urging for more in defense and support for Ukraine. And this is true. European Union, the gross domestic product, far exceeds that of the Russian Federation. They may be smaller in country, in landmass, but they have got an economy that should be envied by the Russians. And maybe that's part of the problem, is they do envy it. But the European Union itself far outstrips Russian GDP. They should be able to absolutely do more. That's going to apply to another big country, which I will not name at this point in time, because it's obvious. More drone remnants were found in Moldova near the Ukraine border. These were fragments of a Shahed-type drone. Once again, we're seeing Russia not being careful with their targeting and ensuring that they are hitting other neutral powers. And yet still we don't do anything about it. From Ozzy, he says, an example of effective response to a bully: early Russian invasion of Ukraine. A retired Finnish general in response to Russian invasion of, for retired Finnish, apologize, I'm going to start that over. A retired Finnish general in response to Russian threats: Russia is welcome to send troops here to join the 300,000 in our soil. Yeah, the Finns have a lot of history with Russia, and they know how to definitely introduce them to the facts of life when it comes to war. The Kyiv Independent spoke to Ben Hodges, retired U.S. Army officer and NATO senior mentor for logistics, at the Munich Security Conference. He said, "We need to body slam Russia." And that's just it. In order to stop Russia, you have to give them a blow so effective, so powerful, that they cannot just come right back. They have to be slammed back to into their country. Not just pushed, but slammed. They've got to feel that pain so hard that they realize that any further attempts will absolutely be to their death. Hey, Robbie, glad to see you this morning. Yes, I think that Aussies, hit that right. Can join them in our soil is a very serious threat to a bully. Because like I said, and as Ozzy said there, those Finns know how to deal with Russian soldiers. Already mentioned that. Already talked about that. Some of these end up getting repeated over time. But here was an interesting one here. Rheinmetall says they want to produce artillery shells inside Ukraine itself. They've already signed a memorandum of intent. They'll just need to stand up a new facility. They're standing up a new facility in Germany, and it only took a couple of months. If they can do something similar in Ukraine, in a few months they could be producing at scale their own 155 millimeter ammunition and not having to wait for foreign partners to provide it. The account of the publication Ukrainian Pravda was hacked on the social network X. The hackers posted photos and videos with Russian propaganda. And this has been a repeat of several other similar hacks. Liga.net was also, its website was hacked, and they published information about they're favorable to Russians. So got to watch out for those hackers and make sure you kind of double check your information against other sources to make sure you see what's going on. That's kind of what, in order to really keep track of what's going on and not get caught up in a lot of the disinformation campaigns, you really got to check against not just multiple sources, but you got to check it against both official and unofficial sources and do some double checks. So be sure you're paying attention, and if something doesn't feel right, double check. The Poles, the Polish farmers, that is, have been complaining about all this Ukrainian grain coming into their country. Russia imported 12 million tons of grain into Poland in 2022 through 2023, whereas Ukraine only imported 4. So who's really flooding the Polish market with grain? The U.S. has transferred $500,000 of confiscated Russian funds to Estonia with the express purpose of helping out Ukraine. This is the first of what's likely to be many of these types of monetary transfers. This would be taking Russian assets that have been seized or frozen in the West and actually sending them to places where it can be used for Ukraine's benefit. The United Kingdom reports they're working with other nations, including the United States, to set up thousands of new AI-enabled drones that could swarm Russian targets simultaneously. The idea is that you hit a small area with thousands or hundreds of these drones. It overwhelms the position. They can use them to attack men, equipment, artillery, anything they can get there, get in the sights of these AI-enabled drones to take down and shut down and destroy. Interesting to see, and it'll be interesting to see what it does on the battlefield. Per the U.S. National Guard, Air National Guard, the first Ukrainian Air Force F-16 pilots are set to graduate training in May. They're already flying solos, and they're working towards operating in the full range of missions that the F-16 can carry out. Lucille says, for our own benefit, if we could only be forward-looking enough to know that the bully won't stop. Well, it's if you look at what the bully says, he's already promised he won't. So that's the we got to watch for that, because it's clear to those of us who are paying attention that that's Russia's overall plan. They want to continue on. In fact, there was that training center graphic that was put out a while back where it showed all Russia and parts of Eastern Europe all in the same color. But some people missed the fact that Alaska was also in the same color. And it said, we will teach you to love the fatherland. They've got expansionist intent. They have a plan. May not be a good plan, but it's a plan nonetheless. Ukrainian forces, according to the Institute for the Study of War, as we go into the front line section, will likely be able to establish new defensive lines not far beyond Avdiivka, which will likely prompt the culmination of the Russian offensive in this area. Basically, Russians flattened all of the buildings of any worth in Avdiivka. There was nothing to speak of left, nothing to defend. So, and it made the buildings actually make it harder to defend. So Ukraine pulled back to what they hope to be as more defensible lines, and have already worked on preparing some positions there. Delays in Western security assistance to Ukraine are likely helping Russia launch opportunistic offensive operations along several sectors of the front line in order to place pressure on Ukrainian forces along multiple axes. And this seems to have been specifically timed. The moment, you can go cause or effect on this one either way you want, but the moment it was clear that the U.S. House was going on vacation for a couple of weeks and thus could not bring up Ukraine aid, it's like Russia turned on, hit the switch, and started assaulting outright, knowing Ukrainian forces were already low on ammunition, knowing that they were already low on equipment, and knowing that there were challenges that they were facing. And militarily, you can't fault that. I mean, as far as Russia goes, it's the moment your enemy is weak is the moment that you attack. I mean, it's simple tactics. That doesn't make it feel any better. Russian forces are likely seeking to take advantage of two windows of opportunity with the recent initiation of their simultaneous offensive operations: the period before the upcoming spring thaw and the nuanced dynamics of Western aid provision. So the mud's about to hit again, and some places it already is. And with Western aid kind of being pretty lackluster right now, for lack of a better way to say it, you put the two together, if they can get a good solid bit of ground recovered right before that mud gets bad, it'll be months before Ukraine will be able to actually do an assault back through that area. And that'll give them time to set up new minefields, set up new defensive positions to dig in. Russia could replicate Avdiivka's capture tactics if the West continues to delay aid, also according to the Institute for the Study of War. Now, I got to see an article on this that I don't have right now, but I did see this article that was describing how Russian tactics changed. Early in the assault on Avdiivka, they were doing the typical toss a bunch of soldiers on top of some BMPs, charge at a position, get it blown up, all of them retreat. They would do this over and over and over: tanks, BMPs, troops, artillery preparation, basic standard Russian military tactics. Then they switched it up and went to almost no armored response, but small groups of around 20-ish soldiers would assault. And yes, a bunch of them would die, but 2 or 3 would jump into a position that the Ukrainians couldn't directly assault. old basement, some kind of a dugout, something that was relatively secure from Ukrainian eyes and Ukrainian attacks. Then the next group of 20 guys would come through the exact same place, and another 2 or 3 would get through and to that one same spot. They'd do it again, and they'd do it again until they had a total of 20 guys in this spot. Then they would assault forward from that spot with this built-up force, and they might get 2 or 3 to the next spot where they could hide. And repeat, small groups, small amounts. Each time 1, 2, 3 people might make it through to this new position. That's how they carried out this assault, is literally by pouring bodies at it and taking tiny positions step by step. Instead of having the large assaults that would go in, get absolutely smashed, and then retreat, what's left would literally stay in those positions. And that's how Russia ended up taking Avdiivka, is this literal wave of meat, but not retreating, even though you took massive losses. It's an expensive, painful way to fight a war. The number of assaults have picked up all across the lines, Kupiansk and Verbova in particular, in the Zaporizhia area, which would be mostly Robotyne here. Was a series of offensive by Russian forces going back to their standard tactics, where they would jump a bunch of guys on top of a BMP and go charging at the enemy. They'd get shelled and slaughtered, and then what was left would retreat. So they're using their standard tactics elsewhere, trying to make some progress in those other areas. The question is, will they learn from their experience? I hate to even call that learning, but will they learn from their experience over in Avdiivka and start using those tactics elsewhere? Or will they keep up with the standard Russian method? Communication seems to be an issue as far as finding tactics that work and getting it across the front lines. Ozzy, I'm reading your comment. I'm not sure I understand what blicking is. I think you mean troops that are refusing to fight, maybe? So I'm not sure on that one. Give me some clarification on that one. But there were absolutely signs that Russian officers were giving their soldiers drugs, blocking troops. Okay, that makes more sense. Yes. Sorry, I was sitting there going, I couldn't figure out what that meant for a moment there. Yes, blocking troops, that is expected to be part of the reason why they were able to do those assaults in Avdiivka. Maybe those troops knew that if they returned, they'd be walking right into their own deaths. So forward to death or back to certain death. It's a possibility. I have seen indications that Russian officers have been giving their soldiers drugs, and I've seen it in multiple places. So I think I would call it likely. It's a likely thing they're doing there, where they're actually using drugs to motivate their troops to get into warfare. Sounds like something that a certain side in World War II was doing too. So, yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same. More talk of the shooting down of aircraft. This is time confirming the Su-34 shoot down, and a lot of other confirming information on that, kind of just to let you know that, yes, that we're getting multiple sources on that information as well. Now let's talk about the things going on in Ukraine front lines, the actual lines themselves. Let's go ahead and refresh my map here. Yes, this is the deep state map. I did look at the Andrew Perpetua map, and we might flip over to that in just a moment here. The most recent changes, especially over here near Robotyne, are interesting. Let me back this up a step or two here. In fact, let me bring it out just a bit. Overnight, Russian forces attempted to get into Robotyne. There was talks that they had actually gotten a foothold in the outskirts of Robotyne itself. Today's information indicates that was, shall we say, optimistic thinking on the Russian part. However, there is this section over here on the right, close to Verbova, where the Russians did manage to make a push into some of these tree lines and get some advances on. Other areas, it's been busy all over the place. The Russians are basically taking every opportunity they can to advance. So you can see here near Ivanivska, or south of Kromova, the Russians have managed to capture some of the open area here near some, looks like water there, which would make this low territory in this area here. So kind of low-hanging fruit that they can capture. I'll talk about that, and the fighting continues. There we go. That's kind of the most recent stuff. The rest of the front lines, there's been clear indications that the Russians have been taking a lot more steps to step it up. Reports of additional assaults in Kupiansk and over even near the Bakhmut area, though that's been relatively quiet. Let's go and take a brief look at the Andrew Perpetua map here and kind of get a little zoom in on the Verbova-Robotna area. One of the things is it does, with this map, is it does take a little bit to kind of get updated. You can see here that the red arrows show where the Russian forces are making additional assault attempts across this area. They do show that the overall situation still remains relatively secure for Ukraine in Robotna itself, though this area is now pretty recently become more of a gray zone again. So we're seeing a lot of this, the assault through this area as well. The one thing that Andrew Perpetua does show better than I think anybody else right now is the situation near Krinky, where we've got this area right here that was recently recaptured by the Ukrainian forces, and they're actually expanding their foothold into the city. Russians have been trying to do some more assaults in this area, but no real changes in lines to speak of beyond that. Chuck Farr talked about the Avdiivka area, talked about the changes in the front lines. He was, he does call this a successful retrograde maneuver, phased retrograde maneuver to shorten the lines of defense, and they're now consolidating their defensive positions west of the city. No Reports confirms the additional information there. Also points out that there was an assault attempt towards Lestochkiny. And this one, the Russian troops came under heavy fire and were entirely denied any advance in this direction. The Russians reported they possibly did, but it's been back and forth on that. And as far as I can tell, they didn't get any purchase or foothold in Lestochkiny, which is right about here on the map. Let's see, right about in that area. The situation in Robotna, Verbova, again, they're saying the attacks have been repulsed. But with these attack attempts, the No Reports map is showing the gray zone being widened some. Speaking of Robotna, this tank is a T-55. Not a newer T-55, as in one that's been upgraded, but an actual T-55A, one of the early, just post-World War II versions. Russia is now using even these on the front lines now. Originally, they talked about using them as artillery pieces, kind of relatively static position pieces behind the front lines and just used to shell positions. They're using them on the front lines now. Interesting to see. And this is after they made a big fuss about it, too. I mean, they talk about their progress in this area, making these assaults, but with a T-55, pretty crazy. More talk about Lestochkiny here, where the Russians spoke about everything being a mess outside of Lestochkiny. And Robotna here, I thought this was interesting. This is where I picked up the information from Supernova Plus, that they initially said they gained a foothold in Robotna. Now those people are deleting their posts, claiming that they gained that foothold in there. So they initially said, yeah, we got that foothold in Robotna. Then they had to go back and eat their words. And that's the kind of the front lines right now. Overall, except for Avdiivka, where the Ukrainians were actually pushed back, there's been no significant changes to the front lines, but let's cut to the chase. It's tenuous. It's a tough situation on those front lines right now. And that's the situation on the front. I'm going to be going into some extras here real quick here. I don't have any water in here, so I can't take a drink break today, but pipe in. Let me know what you're thinking, and if you have any comments on this. I do absolutely, by the way, appreciate every comment you guys make. I learn things when I see what you guys see, because I do a lot of research on this, but my eyes don't see everything. Crimean Wind says their eyes see everything. My eyes don't see everything. I just work hard to try and find everything I can for you. And so I know you guys will know things that I don't. So I appreciate you guys piping up and letting me know what you know. From defensive Ukraine, we're moving on to the extras now. The 31st Mechanized Brigade, after a combat mission, is having to tow home their Bradley. But note, they are towing it home. They're not leaving it behind, which means they're in a relatively secure position from whatever they were doing in this operation. From, again, defensive Ukraine, despite the cold, dirt, and fatigue, we continue to fight for freedom. And make no mistake, that's the exact fight that's going on. Freedom from tyranny. Freedom to decide your own future. Freedom to be free of Russian rule. Solovyev makes quite a few appearances in Western media, mostly because we see his words, what he says. And he's kind of ticked off about that, because he says he wants the English speakers to get their news about Russia from Russia Today, the official sources that say the official party lines. Because, and this is my interpretation, he wants his information, the words he speaks, to be for his domestic audience. He wants Russians to be inspired by his words, to see how things are for Russians. And so when the American media gets their hands on it, interprets it, posts it out there, showing that what the Russians are saying, to their own people, they get pretty ticked off about that. It's literally a propaganda anti-coup for them. Sorry about that. European officials are monitoring the U.S. presidential race, and they're preparing to potentially create an alternative to NATO, a continent-wide complement to NATO, in fact, just to have an alternative security arrangement in the event of issues over in the United States. Hungary's been having some trouble lately, and I'm kind of getting out of Ukraine a little bit here, though there's always relationships between it. There were mass protests continuing in Hungary over a child sex abuse scandal where the president pardoned the convicted abuser. They did not like that, so the president ended up having to resign. And now there's calls for Orban to do so as well. If you actually saw recently that Orban was calling for President Trump to be elected, hoping it would save his own job. So things are pretty crazy over there in Hungary, and we could see some real changes happening over there pretty soon if things keep up like they are. This little bit of article was talking about the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and their deployment to the Eastern Mediterranean. But the interesting thing out of this whole thing was the schedule is relentless. And I'll just kind of read this paragraph right here. So if you want to kind of see what I'm looking at right here, this is that paragraph. If it sounds like a relentless schedule, here is why. It is the first time since World War II that the Navy has operated in an area where they are susceptible to getting shot at all day, every day, according to Vice Admiral Brad Cooper. The Navy since World War II has operated relatively immune to most of land warfare. They have been able to sail out of range of artillery in any of the wars we fought, and where they were unlikely to be under the constant threat of attack. The Red Sea, with the close quarters and the tight area they're having to operate in, they are subject to constant attacks, a constant potential for attacks. And it's wearing. But the now popular commander of the aircraft carrier, Chowda Hill is what he goes by, talks about it and says that he uses rapid, relentless, representative, positive communication to keep his sailors' morale up. He tells them how their sailors how important their job is and to remind them how well they're doing. And he says, what does morale get us? Morale gets us success in battle. That's the ultimate goal. You know, it might allow you to do well on inspections, allow you to do well in your day-to-day activities. But ultimately, it's about combat and success. And it's working. So I thought that was an interesting aside from the Dwight D. Eisenhower operating in the Red Sea against the Houthis in Yemen. Apparently, you can build a very expensive truck, and if it comes from Tesla, the odds are it's going to start rusting in just 2 months with its stainless steel there. I thought this was amazing when the Tesla's owner manual states that Cybertruck owners must immediately remove any substances that could cause a corrosion reaction, including grease, oil, bird droppings, tree sap, dead insects, tar stains, road salt, and other substances. Why would you have a truck if you couldn't use any of those things anywhere near the truck? Russia's FSB has got their priorities absolutely in place. They dispersed a festival of fans of the My Little Pony series, even though they dyed the pony's rainbow mane into the Russian tricolor. Really, it just seems like they're looking for any reason to arrest people and take away their joy and happiness over there in Russia these days. Okay, this one, I've got to turn the audio on. Let me pause this here. Okay, how to get your drone started. I'm sorry, it makes me laugh. That was so fun. It's just funny. It's just funny. And we'll end off today with this video of this cat. Let's go ahead and see if we can get it restarted here. The owner is cleaning up some things, and if you pay close attention, you'll see that there is one of those things on that cat's paw. So he's cleaning up the mess, gets all his stuff put together. The cat looks up and then reveals the one that he managed to sneakily paw away. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. If you have any other questions or comments, absolutely leave them. I do read all those questions and comments when you guys post them. So thank you very much. And on that note, give me that thumbs up if you enjoyed today's video. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again.